You're listening to Taking Care of Business with Marty Fay and Clay Kerner on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.
We are back on Taking Care of Business, Kern Radio Newstalk 1180, with one of the great people, I think, on our side of the aisle, Jane Chastain. Something I want to mention before we go back to Jane. Jane and I was trying to think the last time Jane and I did anything together, and it was an ACLU debate. Remember that, Jane?
I'm not remembering that, Marty.
That was with Susie McMillan and Joellen Allen.
Okay. Now it's beginning to come clear. I was thinking about the time that I came up to Temecula, and I got to speak to your pro-life group.
Yes, at Tehachapi, yep.
Temecula, Tehachapi. Starts with a T.
We get that all the time, not a problem. And then actually you and I did a show similar to this on, I can't mention the station, obviously, but we did something similar to this. There was a panel of 4 or 5 of us, and I think it was your show, not mine, and talking about the election. We did a before-election and after-election thing, and we're talking about the same things now that we did 20 years ago. It's amazing.
Yes, we are, and unfortunately, the only thing that changed is that Republicans had their chance to lead, and they did the right thing for the first couple of years. They actually passed some rescissions. That means that money that had already been appropriated, that they hadn't been spent yet, hadn't gone out the door, and so they called it back and said, no, we're not going to spend this money. And I remember that year in 95, the election was in 94, and in 95, everybody was a budget cutter, even the Democrats. I mean, if you looked at the overall record of whether or not they added or reduced the national debt or the budget, even the Democrats, there were a lot of Democrats that were voting with Republicans to cut the budget. But unfortunately, after that, I don't know if your listeners will remember, but there was a big fight. It was around Thanksgiving. These times around the holidays are really dangerous. And it was around Thanksgiving, and Republicans were trying to force Bill Clinton into passing a budget outline that would reach balance 5 years down the road. I mean, Clinton's budgets had red ink as far as the eye could see. They were trying to force Clinton just to agree to an outline that would eventually reach balance, and he wouldn't agree to it. And they shut down the government, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And there was all this crying and gnashing of teeth, and the Washington Monument was closed, and all these horrible things, and people couldn't go visit their favorite things. They always do that first. And then they were blaming it. Clinton was so good at working the media that he blamed it on the Republicans, and the Washington Post did a poll, and they found that the majority of people blamed the Republicans, and hardly anybody had a clue what the fight was about. And it was at that point that Republicans just lost their nerve. And they realized that, hey, we're first in line at the spending trough. Spending our money, they perceive, gives them power because we buy into this. They brag about what all they do for your district. Friends, there is no reason that we should be sending $1 to Washington, having it layered through layers of bureaucracy, and have our congressmen have to fight to get back 50 cents. We should not be spending money at the federal level that could best be spent at the state level. We ought to be reducing everybody's taxes and let the states do the spending that needs to happen in the states. And, a lot of the Tea Party candidates got skewered because they mentioned cutting out the Department of Education. Most people don't even know that we didn't even have a federal Department of Education until Jimmy Carter put it into place. And the way the Constitution is written, there's supposed to be 50 departments of education at the state level. The federal government has no power to do anything. All the Department of Education can do is suggest and spend tax dollars, and it does that last part really well.
There's a movie out right now called Waiting for Superman. Have you had a chance to see that movie?
I have not, but I've seen parts of it.
Yeah, everyone should see that movie. It really talks about the Department of Education and the teachers' unions and the problems we have with what do they call it, vesting? Tenure.
Yes, and 2 federal agencies that ought to be cut immediately. And I agree. I'm kind of shocked with the producer because he was Al Gore's producer and did the thing on global warming, but I understand he really got it right on Waiting for Superman.
It's about time. Hey, another question. We're either in a recession or a depression, and everybody's watching their budget, holding back on spending dollars. The president gets on the TV and talks about how we need to cut spending, and yet he takes 65 airplanes, 34 warships, and 3,000 people to India. What's your thought on that?
Well, we have, the timing is bad. I agree that the timing is bad, and I agree that, but that India has been slighted. India was slighted in terms of presidential visits in the past. He went over to China. China is not our friend. I mean, we have guns pointed at each other. Unfortunately, China holds the majority of our debt right now, or the biggest chunk of U.S. debt. So we're over a barrel, so to speak. But India is our friend. I mean, India had helped us in the war against terror. India is our friend, and India was long overdue for some attention. So I don't fault him for going to India. I think this trip had been planned way back in June. He had canceled it once before when he was trying to shove health care down our throats, and he thought it was just so important to pass the health care bill.
He shoved it down our throats.
Yes. So, I don't really fault his trip to India. I think maybe we've made a little bit too much of that, and certainly we have to protect our president wherever he is. This may be a little bit over the top, but I can't really fault him for that. I can fault him for a lot of other things. I can also fault Republicans. They're talking about cutting spending down to 2008 levels. We were spending way too much in 2008.
Right.
I mean, I think Republicans have, if they're serious, they have got to be talking about the big picture. They have got to go for the gold. And you and I, the best thing we can do is call our congressman each and every week, plug in to not only National Taxpayers Union, but Citizens Against Government Waste. Check out those websites every week. I still remember a conversation I had with a chief of staff to one of the most tight-fisted congressmen around who was voting the wrong way at in the Republicans' heyday on some of the major issues, and I'm saying, why did your boss vote this way? And they said, Jane, and listen to this well, if you could only sit in these offices one day and see all people that come in here begging us to spend money on this, spend money on that, if you could answer the phones and you hear all the people saying spend money on this, spending money on that, there is nobody that calls and says stop spending money. So that is our job this year. We have to call them every day, every week, at least once a week. Commit calling your congressman and your two senators, even though, they're bad. When the wind only blows on a tree in one direction, which way is it going to grow?
Jane, you talked earlier about, and I forgive me for being a little bit naive, but you said Kevin McCarthy, our local congressman, was rated 87. Can you explain rated based on what, and where these ratings come from, and what they're based on?
The National Taxpayers Union, I think they take over 500 votes and rate them according to what they will do to the federal budget and the national debt. And that is how they compile their ratings. As I said, unfortunately, my only beef with National Taxpayers Union is they grade on the curve. So an 87 isn't all that great. Anybody who's below 90, really, is not doing a good enough job. Ought to be around 95. So that's just number one. If you will then go on NTU.org and go to their bill tally, now this will be the most revealing thing, and Marty, I want you to look this up before next week and let your audience know how your local congressman did on bill tally. And this is every single bill he has sponsored or co-sponsored, whether or not it would reduce the national debt or reduce the budget or add to the budget. And then I want you to let me and your listeners know whether the bills he sponsored would have increased or decreased our budget and national debt.
Okay, I like that idea. We've got about
Just put in his name. It's real easy to do.
Definitely, and that's in the National Taxpayers Union.
NTU.org, bill tally.
Good, I'll do that. We've got about 2 minutes left, Jane. I want to ask you one other question. Actually, two things that happened in San Francisco. One, Happy Meals are banned. I mean, that's tough for those of us that like McDonald's.
What a joke. All McDonald's can do is they can just give a action figure or whatever to a parent that comes in and buys a meal with the kid.
Oh, we are getting close to the end here. I have one quick question for you. What do you think of Nancy Pelosi as the trying to be the minority leader? Do you think that'll...
What a joke. It is the the best gift to Republicans they could have ever had.
Yep. The gift
what a joke. I mean, here is a woman that doesn't know when to exit the stage.
The gift that keeps on giving.
It is.
It's been a joke for 2 years, so why shouldn't it continue?
That's right. Jane, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sorry we got you late, but I'd love to have you back on after the first of the year.
It's my fault. I'll make it up to you. Just remember, everybody, call your congressman every single week. Call Speaker Boehner. We don't need Jerry Lewis as head of appropriations. That would be disaster.
I totally agree. Jane, thank you very much for the time. We will talk to you in 2 weeks on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio Newstalk 1180.